Okay, since I'm going to be gone today, I'm going to quickly go through this slideshow on photographers as artists. So would you guys please open up your document, Photographers as Artists, that you collaborated on last week, and you took notes on all of these photographers. And as I go through this today, would you please, in your notes, add anything that you don't have that I do on this presentation? And go ahead and bold or highlight in a different color things that you have that I also share, because those are the important things that you'll be assessed over. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Felipe Halsman. And by the way, your substitute can pause this video at any time if you need a few more seconds or a little bit more time to take notes. So right now, go ahead and make sure you have that document that you worked on last week, Photographers as Artists, open. All right, so I'll start with Felipe Halsman. So Felipe was a guy who was really frustrated with his photography. He took a lot of pictures and he just wasn't happy with them a lot of the time. So he just kept working and kept working and kept working. And finally, he had a huge success with Victory Red Lipstick, and that was an advertisement campaign. So that's where he first became known. Felipe has 6 rules of photography that we will talk about tomorrow. One thing cool that Felipe did, he studied the art of jumping. And so he liked to have his subjects jump. And so he's taken a lot of famous pictures of people jumping. He had Marilyn Monroe jumping. He had a lot of famous people jumping, and that's what a lot of his photos are today. Tomorrow, we're going to do our own jumpology, and we will take pictures of people jumping. A couple more things about Felipe Halsman. His photos appeared on the cover of Life magazine and on the cover of lots and lots of magazines in the United States. And back in 1958, he was actually listed as one of the 10 greatest photographers ever. So he had a ton of success in that time. Here's just a couple pictures that Felipe took. And there's his Victory Red campaign. And here's a gentleman jumping. I'm not 100% sure who that is. Here's Albert Einstein. And then back here, I think Marilyn Monroe, he has actually jumping. Where's Marilyn? I must be wrong. Sorry, guys. There she is, and I'm not sure who she's jumping with. So anyway, that's Felipe Halsman. Okay, Ann Geddes, I think we've talked about just a little bit. Ann Geddes loved to take pictures of babies. She was obsessed with it. She's almost as obsessed with taking pictures of babies as I am as taking pictures of birds and wildlife. But big difference is she's made millions of dollars with her pictures, and I haven't. She prefers black and white photography over color. However, a lot of her calendars are in color. She lives in New Zealand, and because of that, New Zealand doesn't have a lot of African-American people or Black people, and so she really wanted to include those in her calendars, and so she travels to the United States to take pictures of Black babies. She sold more than 13 million calendars and continues to sell them today. Here's just a few of her shots. Again, she preferred black and white over color, but there's lots and lots of cool poses and things she does. And I'm sure Mrs. Rose would love to see little pictures like this of her grandbaby. Alfred Stieglitz. Now, guys and gals, you might have to pause this presentation right now because Alfred was left off of that document. So if you would scroll to the bottom of your document and add Alfred Stieglitz, and then just don't make a table or anything. Go ahead and just type some of this information down. He was one of the first people who was actually considered an artist with a camera. So his photography, he wanted them to interpret them as art. He wanted them to be framed and put up in their houses and their businesses, things like that. Now, he refused to sell his photos to companies because he really wanted to have that ownership of it. He wanted to be able to give them privately away or, to family and friends and things like that. After he got married, he and his wife took a honeymoon to Europe, and that's where the majority of his most famous pictures came from, is while he was away in Europe. A couple other things you need to know about him. He worked for the Camera Club, which was just a monthly newsletter, and he used his photography to actually change that into a magazine. So the Camera Club was near and dear to his heart, and he did a lot of work for them. He worked hard. He didn't spend time with his kids like so many people don't. He felt bad about it. He worked so hard, he actually had 8 heart attacks. And surviving 8 heart attacks back in the early 1900s is a feat all by itself. Most people, especially back then, 1 heart attack and that would be it. So Alfred Stieglitz, artist with a camera, famous pictures honeymoon, refused to sell his work, hard worker, exhaustion, heart attacks. This is a picture of Georgia O'Keeffe, and it was actually said that he had an affair with Georgia O'Keeffe and ended up divorcing his wife, and they ended up living together, and he took a majority of the photos he took through several years were all of Georgia O'Keeffe, who is also a famous artist. Henri Cartier-Bresson. Henri is the father of modern photojournalism. That's what he's considered. And he basically helped develop the art of street photography. And you still see street photography today. Not so much in Grand Island, Nebraska, but in the bigger cities. Photographers carry cameras, walk the streets of New York, take pictures of people and tell their story. I follow a group on Facebook. What's it called? Now it's I can't think of it right now, but it has to do with street photography and the people and their stories, and it's always really, really interesting. So that was a really big thing about Henri. He did get to meet and photograph Gandhi, which a lot of people, haven't had that opportunity. And we studied Robert Capa. Remember World War II? If your photos aren't good enough, you aren't close enough, boom, Capa out. He founded Magnum Photos with Robert Capa. And so those are 4 things that Henri Cartier-Bresson was known for. Here's a few of his pictures. Obviously, there's Gandhi. And then here's some people in the streets. So that's Henri Cartier-Bresson. Now, I know I'm going really fast, so again, you can pause this video anytime. Annie Leibovitz. She's still taking pictures today. As a matter of fact, she's the one who took the famous picture on the cover of Vanity Fair showing Caitlyn Jenner, who had been Bruce Jenner for years and years and years and recently transformed or whatever into Caitlyn Jenner. And Annie Leibovitz was the one he trusted the most to take her pictures now. And there was a big Vanity Fair magazine all about that. But anyway, she's a famous portrait photographer, and she actually traveled with the Rolling Stones in 1970, and she was the main photographer for their magazine and took some really cool shots in. 1996, she was the official photographer for the Summer Olympics. There's hundreds of photographers at all the Olympics, but she was the official photographer and got some pretty cool shots. She actually took pictures for Disney, which is another huge thing in a photographer's life. Disney doesn't just accept anyone. And she's got lots of exhibits around the world, but she's got a huge one in Washington, D.C. with over 200 pictures. And here's some of her famous pictures. Obviously, there's a Rolling Stones and then a really strong, muscular athlete from the Olympics in 1996. Diane Arbus. She was a troubled woman, but many of her photos became famous. She liked to photograph twins, triplets, circus people. So they kind of called her the photographer of freaks, which she didn't like that. She did learn how to shoot photography from her husband and ended up advertising fashion with him. She then taught photography at Parsons School of Design, which had to do with fashion. And her life came to an end through suicide. So here's a few of her pictures. There's twins. There's a little boy holding a hand grenade, and there's a guy who's really tattooed up. I believe he was probably in a circus of some type. So that's Diane Arbus. And finally, we have Ansel Adams. He's easy. He truly is an artist with his photography. Black and white landscapes are what Ansel Adams is known for. And you'll see his pictures everywhere. I've seen him in dentist office, in businesses, at people's homes. Just a beautiful photographer who loves to take pictures of the American West, specifically Yosemite National Park. Okay, so I know that was really fast, but that's the information you need to know. And hopefully you got that information in your Google Doc now that you've collaborated and shared with each other. For the rest of the period, here's what I want you to do. I want you to make sure you have the application Haiku Deck. And Haiku Deck's similar to Google Slides, except for it's more picture oriented with just a small amount of text. And I would like you to prepare a haiku deck about these photographers. And I want you to have one of their pictures in the background and then a little bit of text on it. But I want you to be able to talk about that photographer while showing that slide. So you might have some notes on them or something like that. So prepare a haiku deck about these 7 photographers. You'll probably need a couple slides each. Make sure you have pictures that they took in the background, a little bit of text, and then be able to talk about each of them. Okay, thanks guys. We'll see you tomorrow.